Aoba wondered why they didn't take the initiative to attack, and was told that the enemy was very numerous, while they only had 4 people who could fight. But it was actually 5 because Conrad had recovered and could continue the battle. He also mentioned that Vera had something to discuss privately with the 3 members of the synchronization group. Meanwhile, the elite group was extremely anxious because they couldn't detect the Federation, so the commander deployed a 360-degree radar, even though using this radar would expose their position first. They weren't afraid because they were stronger. The Federation commander quickly jammed their radar frequencies. Vera now informed Aoba about how many people had suffered severe brain trauma in the past when experimenting with synchronization. Therefore, she had to design the specialized cockpit to support synchronization that he was using now. She also created a standard brain wave pattern and trained compatible people to synchronize with that standard brain wave, thus achieving their current success. However, Aoba was a special case. He didn't need to go through training because his brain waves were already compatible with their standard brain waves. Therefore, he could almost synchronize with any pilot they trained. However, problems arose from this. The fact that he could synchronize with other pilots had caused issues for 2 prime examples, From and Dio. It caused their brain waves to deviate far from the original standard brain waves. As a consequence, the more they synchronized, the less Dio and From would be able to synchronize with anyone other than Aoba. Synchronizing with Aoba was a double-edged sword. However, if they stopped now, Dio and From could still train to return to the standard brain wave synchronization. Suddenly, at this moment, their ship was detected by the enemy, but not by the elite group's ship. It was Ulfried's new ship. However, he was ordered to leave the prey for the elite group. So Ulfried had to tell Hina to be patient for a while longer to regain their honor. As soon as the elite commander received the Federation's position, he told Ulfried's side to sit back and watch him fight without needing to assist. The Federation commander saw that the enemy had no intention of attacking all at once, so they could still handle it. Vera now wanted all 3 to clearly decide who they would pair with this time. All 3 decided to make their choices simultaneously. And so in the end, Aoba and Dio pointed at each other while From chose to withdraw. Aoba asked Dio if he was sure about this decision, to which Dio replied that he would rather throw away all his training efforts than risk leaving Aoba alone in battle to synchronize with an uncertain From. Besides, they were still not sure if retraining would successfully return them to standard brainwaves, so they just hoped there was still a way to salvage the situation. Both sides then went into battle, and the commander noticed that the enemy had 10 units and had split into 2 flanks. So the synchronized pair would handle one flank, while the other 3 would take care of the remaining flank. However, Aoba's flank started to feel strange as they couldn't see the enemy commander anywhere. Just as they realized they were being trapped, the commander and a few others revealed themselves to catch both of them off guard. The 2 had no choice but to synchronize with each other, but the enemy commander had scattered mines, causing them to struggle to find an escape route. But the only escape route had been blocked by him. Aoba and Dio still had one trump card. They both closed in on each other and flew at high speed to turn themselves into an arrow piercing through all enemies. Vera noticed that although synchronizing with Aoba was a double-edged sword, it allowed Dio to become significantly stronger. The enemy commander was then rushed and struck down by both of them, and the remaining enemies scattered like headless snakes. As soon as they noticed the synchronization had been dissolved, Ulfried allowed his team to enter the battle. The commander knew that continuing to fight would be futile, so he ordered a retreat into the storm. Everyone was called back, and Ulfried also didn't want unnecessary losses by advancing into the storm, so he withdrew as well. But Hina separated from the team to pursue them relentlessly, forcing others to turn back and follow. Aoba and Dio had returned to the ship by this time, but before Aoba could enter, he was blocked by Hina. He had to stay and fight and couldn't go inside. Hina's teammates tried to advance, but were pushed back by the Federation ship, and soon both were blown down by the storm. When Aoba later regained consciousness, he found himself on an island. The mecha had run out of power, so he couldn't communicate. He got out of the mecha and found Hina trapped in a stream. He ran down to check and saw that she was still unconscious, and the cockpit was flooded with water. Aoba tried to open the cockpit, but it wouldn't budge. Meanwhile, on Alfried's side, the female supervisor didn't want to send people to search for Hina, but wanted to focus on finding the elite team leader, believing he was still alive. As for Dio, he also wanted to go find Aoba, but the commander thought that the priority now was the safety of everyone on the ship. When the storm passed, they would be forced to leave immediately. Dio angrily walked away, and the commander knew that even if he forbade it, Dio would set out to find Aoba. Hina had now regained consciousness and began to control Aoba. She tied Aoba up and went to check on the robot, but it wouldn't work. The situation was similar with Aoba's robot, but she managed to get Aoba's bag from inside. She then used a gun to control Aoba, and he still tried to believe this was the Hina he knew. But she spoke directly, saying she didn't know how similar she was to the Hina he knew, but she wasn't her and didn't know him at all. She was a Republican soldier, not his classmate. Dio, seeing that the storm had eased, wanted to go find Aoba. From also went along and let Dio know that the commander only gave him 3 hours to search. Meanwhile, the Republicans were still trying hard to find the team leader, but there was almost no trace. Aoba was now sitting and talking about the Hina he knew. He really wanted to meet the previous Hina to ask her about things he was still confused about. Suddenly, Aoba's robot up there slipped down the slope and fell, pushing a pile of dirt and rocks down and blocking the cave entrance. Both were forced to find a way to dig a path to escape. Hina took a shovel to dig, and Aoba wanted to help because he didn't want to die there either. He then dug with Hina, but no matter how much they dug, they couldn't make a hole because dirt from above kept falling down. So they both changed direction and climbed up to dig. Meanwhile, Bizon's team had found the wreckage of the team leader's robot, so Alfried decided that from now on, it would be his team's job. He allowed the whole team to go find Hina after the team leader's fate had been determined as killed in action. At this point, Aoba's side was running out of oxygen. Seeing Hina beginning to struggle for breath, Aoba exerted all his strength to dig a hole. Suddenly, he managed to break through, causing water to rush in. Both were swept away, but Aoba managed to swim and pull Hina to the surface. He then dragged her to shore and realized their situation was quite dire as they had lost their supplies back. Suddenly, Aoba's robot reactivated, and Dio was able to call through. According to Vera, this was a special mechanism of synchronized robots. Synchronization waves would be continuously emitted, and if close enough, they could remotely activate the other robot. Dio asked about the situation there and about Hina, but Aoba only gave the location before cutting off the communication. He wanted Hina to use this communication device to call her teammates for pickup. He wanted to let her go because he didn't want her to be taken prisoner. She managed to signal Bizon, and shortly after, Dio's side arrived first. Before letting Hina go, Aoba returned the hairpin that belonged to the previous Hina to her. Although she wasn't the person he knew, he still wanted to give it to her. Dio and from then came to pick up Aoba and carried the robot back. Hina had changed her view of Aoba and would remember him. Upon returning, Aoba had almost no clues left to help him return to the past. The vice commander then called the ship because he heard they had nearly lost a valuable synchronized robot. However, the vice commander still downplayed this, thinking that losing one synchronized robot wouldn't cause much damage. Vera was a bit annoyed because losing Aoba meant their trump card would be gone. Suddenly, a professor called to report that he was about to visit the Federation ship. He was the head of the Synchronized Robot Research Institute, so hacking into this communication channel was a small matter for him. His aircraft soon arrived and was warmly welcomed by everyone on the ship. He wanted Dio and Aoba to demonstrate synchronization for him. Aoba still didn't know who he was, so he and Mayu introduced themselves personally. As mentioned, he was the one who developed synchronization technology and was Vera's teacher, but Vera was the one who created the machine to help complete the synchronization. The experimental synchronization machine was then activated, and Aoba and Dio synchronized for the maximum 6 minutes. When the synchronization ended, Dio went to meet Aoba privately. During the process, Dio had realized that Aoba had lied about meeting Hina on the island. Aoba admitted it, but said he had no hope left because the Hina he knew truly no longer existed. Dio now understood the reason for his despondency and started to criticize Aoba for being weak. Aoba, irritated by Dio's words, brought up the issue with Dio's sister to retaliate. They ended up fighting, forcing their teammates to intervene and separate them. They were then forced to lock both in a detention room to calm down. The professor later came to find them and completely believed that Aoba came from the past. His hypothesis was similar to the research on the synchronization mechanism. Although people initially said it was absurd, it eventually became feasible. The professor now announced that synchronization technology had not yet been widely disseminated because it still lacked convincing evidence. He also revealed that the Republic currently had the potential to develop this technology because one of his students, who was also Vera's classmate, had defected to the Republic. His name was Han, and he had just reviewed the mission of the female supervisor. Han informed her that she only had one last chance to destroy the Republic's ship, as the superiors could not accept any more failures. Elfried had briefed the team about the upcoming plan, but the female supervisor said she was the leader of this mission. Bizan had asked Hina about how she contacted them, and she lied that she had secretly sent a signal from Aoba's robot. But she only managed to do so because a few minutes later, the others came to take Aoba away, and she could only escape. Bizan tentatively believed her and left to carry out the mission. Aoba and Dio had now heard about the impending attack and were released to join the battle. The commander was unsure about letting them synchronize in this state. But when they went into battle, both temporarily put aside their personal grudges to focus on fighting. The synchronization still went smoothly, and both stood to shoot down missiles while waiting for the ship to recharge energy for the shield. After the first wave of missiles, Bizan, feeling resentful towards Aoba, targeted him to unleash fire. Dio wanted to go support, but was blocked by the enemy commander and Elfried. The fact that both couldn't reduce enough missiles caused the shield to fail to block everything, and the scientist's plane was hit. Although injured, he concealed it from everyone and claimed he was fine. The enemy continued to fire missiles, and they didn't know how many missiles they had to fire continuously like that. Suddenly, Aoba's side realized the enemy was stalling until the synchronization ended, and indeed, Scientist Han had predicted the maximum synchronization time was 6 minutes, and now they only had just over 1 minute left. Dio and Aoba argued again in the middle of the battle, but their argument became motivation for both to try harder so as not to lose to the other. They successfully cleared all the missiles, but only a few seconds remained. Surprisingly, even after the time limit had passed, the synchronization was still active, shocking everyone. The enemy side thought it was just a miscalculation, but when the time exceeded 7 minutes, the female supervisor was so shocked that she didn't notice Dio approaching. Dio destroyed her robot before the synchronization time ended. Luckily, the robot didn't explode, so Elfried managed to rescue her in time. They then retreated. The scientist, seeing the best result of both reaching over 8 minutes, could rest assured and close his eyes. He was then taken for burial. The commander on the Republic side was also replaced, in other words, fired. The Republic then sent more reinforcements, and the person coming to reinforce them this time was none other than Hina's father. The next day, the scientist's funeral was held, and Dio's father also attended. That day, Dio, Aoba, and Mayu were given a day off to go out. Many people came and asked them to buy things when they went out, the list stretching for miles. As the three set out, the commander had come to meet the general, and he allowed them to proceed with synchronization research, but he wanted to check once to see the results. While Aoba's group had just finished buying a pile of things, he expressed his intention to help Dio reconcile with his father. But Dio got angry and told Aoba not to meddle in his personal affairs and left alone. Aoba didn't know what to do with him, so he just continued on. A while later, he accidentally met Dio's sister, Fiona. Meanwhile, Vera had told the captain about Han. She defined him as a genius, admitting she had to concede to him. But she had gotten ahead of him in creating the synchronization machine, and Han still hadn't created this. However, if this thing fell into his hands, he would certainly improve it to a new level. Han now also wanted to urgently find a way to steal Vera's technology to improve, because he was confident that with the Republic's technology, it would be very simple. Hina's father had now entrusted her to Ulfried for training, but soon they would have a mission to infiltrate the Federation's new base to steal the design of synchronization technology, and if possible, to take both of Aoba and Dio's synchronized robots. She wasn't confident about participating because she felt a bit guilty towards Aoba after he had helped her, but Bizon stepped up to request partnering with Hina for this mission, partly to help her and partly to monitor her. Aoba, hearing from Fiona about how Dio and his father had a fierce confrontation at noon, wanted even more to go talk to the siblings' father. But Fiona thought her father wouldn't listen to a stranger, so she asked him not to make a big deal of it. Dio, that noon, had just met the old butler and then encountered his father. Although the father and son sat eating together, neither was willing to speak first. The father spoke first, thanking him for protecting the family at the old base. He had also heard about Dio and Aoba's wave misalignment, so he thought his son should quit being a soldier as soon as possible, because Aoba was just a civilian, and if anything happened to Aoba, Dio would become useless without his only synchronization partner. But Dio believed that Aoba was not easy to kill. Although he was a person with many aspects that Dio found irritating, Aoba had never disappointed them on the battlefield. He understood Dio and let him go. Dio also thanked his father for worrying about him, making his father realize how much Dio had changed after all this time. At the end of that day, Aoba's group had also taken Dio's sister back to the hotel and accidentally met him there. The two siblings had a pleasant conversation, and Dio revealed that he had also reconciled with their father. Aoba felt that he didn't need to do anything as everything seemed to resolve itself. Mayu, however, believed that it was because of Aoba's influence on Dio that he was willing to open up like that. The next day, the two friends were once again brought in for testing for the Commander-in-Chief to observe, and he was completely surprised by the astonishingly low latency in the synchronization process. But the two boys still argued over minor discrepancies in the synchronization. That evening, soldiers from the Republic and Hina sneaked near the base and changed their clothes to infiltrate. That night, some civilian aircraft disguised as cargo planes were set on fire to request permission to land. The soldiers rushing to extinguish the fire provided an opportunity for enemy troops to sneak in. When they successfully infiltrated, Ulfried detonated all the planes, releasing robots to attack. While that group caused chaos outside, Hina's group would go stealing. Hearing the news, the commander summoned Aoba's entire group and wanted everyone to split up and take action, as having only 8 robots attack was too suspicious. The trio with synchronization abilities would go to retrieve the robots, while the remaining group would go support and eliminate the intruders. Dio had given weapons to Aoba because he wasn't sure what would happen. After a while, Hina's soldiers successfully reached the location of the two robots and began the hacking process to steal them. But while Hina was overwhelmed by guilt, an engineer struggled to shoot her. Her father stepped in to take the bullet and was injured. Soldiers quickly rushed in and blocked the only escape route, forcing Hina's side to retreat deeper to hold out. Her father and Hina were taken to a room for temporary shelter. Knowing he didn't have much time left, he revealed a truth to Hina, that she wasn't his biological daughter, but a child he had adopted after finding her on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Aoba's group had been separated due to a robot falling and blocking their path. Hina's father wanted her to leave and let him have his most glorious moment in his final moments. She painfully left and encountered Aoba. She now didn't know who she really was. She wasn't the Hina that Aoba knew, nor was she her father's biological daughter. At this time, Bison heard that Hina had disappeared and frantically went to search. Aoba explained to Hina that she was herself, so if she wanted, she could return with Aoba, and he would explain to everyone to help them accept her as part of the Federation. But Bison had found them and suggested that she was about to betray the father who had risked his life to protect her, causing her to waver in her decision. He ran to shoot Aoba, but Dio and From arrived, pushing Bison back and forcing him to take Hina and run. Outside, there were now countless missiles flying towards them, forcing the command ship to raise shields. Suddenly, Aoba and Dio's robots were stolen, so the captain ordered them to be shot down. Aoba disagreed because Hina was on board. He believed Hina was being forced to stay with the Republic, so he decided to save her at all costs. Dio knew that if he stopped Aoba now, he would no longer fight for them in the future, so he took out two old synchronization robots for him and Aoba to go and reclaim them, as they still had the advantage in synchronization. Vera thought this was too dangerous, but both ignored the warning and synchronized on their own. As soon as they synchronized, both experienced headaches and saw visions of the robots falling, but they ignored it and rushed forward. However, while fighting Bison, the synchronization waves of both exceeded control limits and caused them to see each other's memories. It seemed Bison could also see these images. The synchronization state quickly broke down, so Bison and Hina were called back. Aoba and Dio tried to chase after them, but to no avail. When brought back for inspection, both of their indicators were still normal, but Dio had deviated further from the base wave. However, his compatibility with Aoba had improved. Afterwards, they had a proper conversation about everything that had happened. Meanwhile, Hina was questioned by Bison about her protecting Aoba. She tried to explain about her past as Aoba had mentioned, but he didn't care and claimed that if last night's events were revealed, only he could save her. She was then called by Dr. Han to test as a synchronization pilot. He gave her time to consider whether she wanted to participate in this experiment, and he deceived her by injecting a drug to stabilize her mind. During this time, Dio informed the command room that everything Aoba had said about being from the past was true, and he had indeed traveled from the past to the present. The current Hina was the only clue they had to figure out how Aoba had managed to time travel. That night, Han informed Alfred that Hina had volunteered to be a synchronization pilot to avenge her father. Hearing this, Bison went to question Hina, but by now she was under mind control and only listened to Han's fabrications. He also manipulated Bison into becoming a synchronization pilot with Hina. Despite the brainwave discrepancy, he still volunteered for the experiment, making the synchronization process almost unbearably painful. On Aoba's side, they were preparing to depart. Earlier, they had discovered a giant cannon built by the Republic. They shouldn't have been worried yet, but suddenly this morning it had started charging energy, causing concern among the superiors who sent them on a mission to destroy the cannon. The new synchronization robot was also completed, so they could go into battle. When it was brought, Dio wanted to let Aoba know that he also had things to protect. So if he had to choose, he would choose to protect his important people rather than Hina. Therefore, if that choice had to be made, Aoba could do what he wanted, and Dio wouldn't stop him. The enemy had now detected the Federation's ship approaching. The supervisor, who was somehow still there, had given the commander of this base a strategy to counterattack. Bison and Hina were prepared for synchronized piloting, and she was now no different from a puppet, or more accurately, a pre-programmed robot. The enemy had now loaded the cannon and fired it, shooting straight through the mountain, completely destroying the ships in its path without giving them a chance to evade. The command ship luckily escaped, but had to continue the mission. Alfred quickly joined the army to attack the container ship. Dio and Aoba's robots hadn't arrived yet, so both were anxiously waiting to enter the battle. Hina and Bison had entered the battlefield and rushed to the front to take down the Federation's ship. The enemy was preparing to fire again, so the vice commander had requested the command ship to hurry and destroy the cannon. Dio and Aoba had temporarily boarded 2 first-generation robots to carry out the mission, and Vera forbade them from using synchronization as it hadn't been fully repaired. Hina experienced a shock on the robot that almost brought her back to consciousness, but the helmet made by hand caused her to lose consciousness again. Bison and Hina then synchronized, but midway through she stopped because she remembered something. However, Doctor had increased the control, causing her to lose consciousness again. Bison rushed straight to the command ship to attack, but fortunately, the new generation synchronization robots for Aoba and Dio had arrived. They switched robots and immediately synchronized to fight. Seeing the 2 robots before him, Aoba realized that Bison was the one who had gone back to the past to kill him initially, and the other must be Hina. The synchronized robots engaged in battle, so the Federation side quickly counterattacked as the enemy's advantage was lost. Vera also called to inform Aoba and Dio that one of the pilots on the other side was being forced to synchronize, so they could exploit this point to gain an advantage. Aoba had determined this was a risky move, so he would be the one to go and wake Hina up. Both of them disengaged from synchronization to allow Aoba to approach and communicate directly with Hina. He called out Hina's name and projected his face for her to see, successfully waking her up. Her synchronization was immediately cut off. Taking advantage of this, Dio and Aoba quickly moved to deal with the remaining cannon. On the way, Aoba and Dio were intercepted by Bison. He recaptured Hina to force her into synchronization again, but she tried to resist. Aoba decided to take a risk and sent a signal to synchronize with Hina. She responded to Aoba's call, and they quickly succeeded. Their synchronization rate was even higher than with Dio. They used this combined technique to block the enemy's cannon shot. The immense power helped them successfully block that cannon shot. However, the reaction between their technique and the cannon shot once again created a space tunnel. Bison was sucked in, and Hina realized that if she left Bison like that, he would return to the past and kill Aoba, so she rushed to go through the portal with him. Aoba tried to stop Hina, but was held back by Dio. She had completely returned to the past, and Aoba now understood that Hina had been caught in a space loop, and he had never once managed to stop or save her from it. But he made a quick decision, and just as Hina was about to rush in with Bison, he rushed to save her. Dio also decided not to stop Aoba anymore, but flew with him to hold on to Hina and use full force against Bison. The loop was ended here, and Allied forces quickly shot down the Republic's cannon. The Federation side achieved a great victory. Now, when Hina asked Aoba why he didn't enter the vortex to return, he believed there would still be opportunities in the future. Moreover, if he left now, there would be people who would miss him terribly. They then returned together in glorious victory, and the film ends here.